Hi, nice to meet you too. I just want to start by saying that this is such a phenomenal show. It's probably my favorite Marvel show so far.
Thank you so much.
Can you talk a little bit about the unique animation style of What If? Because it's not like anything I've really ever seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I feel like animation is having a moment, and part of that moment, which I'm very grateful for, is that we finally get to tell a certain types of story in animation that so far really didn't really have a chance to do. So there, it feels very new that way, and we really wanted to make sure that it was as new on the outside as it was on the inside, and that the presentation of the show and the visual approach to it was as fresh and exciting, and would really signal to everyone, hey man, this is something new we're doing here. So and like there's basically three main visual components to the show. One is of course the comics, where it's the DNA of the piece, and obviously there's like this boundless kind of imagination and the power of it. Your Kirby, your Buscema, all that stuff. All the classic comic stuff. But also there's cinema, because we're equally as huge fan on the show, our team, we're as hugely into comics as we are into movies. And so there's a passion for filmmaking and cinema and its different genres and tones and points of views and the different flavors of film language, which we get to visit through the different episodes because they're so different. And so we put those two things together and it gets very exciting. But we really needed like a third element to really sort of bring it to like a new place, and that's the kind of illustrative influence of classic illustrators like Jesse Leindecke, for instance, where it's stuff that feels elevated, it feels sophisticated, it feels like there's great taste to it, and yet it's bold, it's expressive, it's appealing, it's got potential to be very powerful. So we kind of collided those three approaches, and then it gives you something that gives you such a range that you can go from moments that are your physical action that you really kind of feel in your bones when you're watching it, to emotional moments that you kind of feel in your heart when you're watching it, right? So it's those elements that come together to create this.
Yeah, you definitely feel some of those punches when you see
Yes.
that. Were there any characters or movies that you guys kind of were not allowed to go like work with, or was kind of everything on the table?
I don't think it's like you're not allowed to do this or that. It's more like we're trying to take some of those character moments that were extremely meaningful in the MCU and use like a variation on these moments to get deeper into character. It's like this thing in life. If like, what if I, got on the next train as opposed to this one and I'd met somebody else? How would my life turn out completely different? Or, what if like this really kind of heavy moral choices was suddenly coming upon me, and now it's up to me to, how would I react to that? These are the questions everybody's, just the thing you ask yourself in your life, but you don't know the answer to these questions until it happens to you. And so it's a chance to take these characters whose vibe we know and who we know these characters, and to a certain point they know themselves to a certain extent, and by throwing them into new situations or twisting their circumstances just a little bit, like this whole new side is kind of demanded of them to kind of emerge. And then you explore these characters even on a deeper level, and seeing them like Peggy in episode 1, or T'Challa in the second one, or Strange in this one, or just all of them basically, Fury in the third, just to see how the characters know more about themselves at the end of the story that they did at the beginning. That's incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, I love that it really dives into these characters in different ways. And it really feels like what's cool about it is the genre plays into that a lot. Can you talk about how the genre has impacted the design and animation for each episode?
Absolutely. Like for instance, for let's take the first movie, right? The first episode, which is a take on first Avenger. So it's taking place during World War II. And so you have characters that are of a certain era. So of course the actors are going to perform it slightly differently. And of course the animators are going to have to animate it also slightly differently because, Peggy from 1940 is not Black Widow from, 2020, right? And so first, they're completely, vastly different personalities, but still, there's also this contextual kind of subtlety and specificity that so whether it's the filmmaking itself by like tipping our hat to different little bits of film language or whether it's a story that takes place within 1 week or a story that takes place over 6 months, it's just like, or in one night or whatever, so all those different facets of cinema kind of just come to the service of the story. And then you have stuff like episode 2, for instance, with Nebula, where it's a heist noir kind of thing, and then so she's a femme fatale, and and it's so fun to activate these different sides of these characters. And again, that we only do it if it reveals more about the character.
Yeah. Were you surprised by any of these changes? Like you mentioned Nebula being the femme fatale, or like with Doctor Strange just going like fully dark. Was there any of them that surprised you and how it impacted the animation?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, when I first watched the animatics and I came on board and saw most of the animatics were actually already put together, and so I just watched them literally as an audience member, and I was completely taken by these stories. And every time, and there's all the ones we can't even talk about, but that I was just like, oh my God, I was like at the edge of my seat, right? So this excitement factor from one scene to the next and is definitely constantly present. But and I kind of veered away from your question and I forgot what it was specifically, but
any of the characters specifically surprised you?
Yes. What I like to think in story is that the end is always written in the beginning, and that what you want is to get to the end of the story and get something that you did not see coming. And yet it's complete. How could I not see this? How could it, there was really no other way because the end was written in the beginning. So I think that's true to every story, but it's definitely even more true to these characters, which again are so well established, except now they're being called upon in a way that you've never seen before. And at the end, you're surprised, you're guessing the entire time, and you get to the end and you're like, yes, it could only be this, so that's the best feeling,
Definitely. Are there any character, like Marvel characters, that are kind of on your bucket list that you hope to be able to incorporate into What If?
Well, I'll tell you, Spider-Man was definitely on my bucket list. I was like, I want to say 8 years old, animating little cut out Spider-Man thing with my Super 8 camera, you know what I mean? And my mom would say, why so few frames? It's a nice drawing. Give it more frames. Like, Mom, it's animation. It goes fast, But so as I'm talking 8 years old, right? So like, that's definitely a character. It's also a character that meant a lot to me when I was in my early teens years, and I could see myself in him for many reasons. And I think that's the magic of these characters, is that as you advance in life, you kind of understand, oh, this is what this is about. This is what this character is about. And you only fully realize it as and then your interest in whichever character kind of moves with that. But even before you do that, because there's this air of truth that sticks to them, and even though you don't know quite what it is, that there's truth in there, and it speaks to you on that kind of human level,
Definitely. Well, I just, again, want to say absolutely amazing show. I cannot wait to see the rest of it, and I'm so excited for season 2.
Thank you so much.